And Republicans set to dare Democrats to block the Senate from voting on the Protecting Women and Girls in Sports Act, which would bar biological men from competing in women's sports. Senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram live on the Hill with more. This should all happen today.
Dana, that's right. Probably about 5:30, 6 o'clock. It's a test vote tonight on a bill sponsored by GOP Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville. The bill needs 60 yeas to break a filibuster. The GOP is daring Democrats to vote no. The House passed the bill in January.
With the House passage of the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, we are one step closer as a nation to making sure that not one more male athlete is able to take a trophy, a roster spot, playing time, resources, or an opportunity to compete from a woman.
If all 53 Senate Republicans vote yes, 7 Democrats must join them to end the filibuster. That's a high bar. Only 2 Democrats supported the bill in the House earlier this winter. Most Democrats are outraged at the legislation. They say people born as men and playing sports against women is not a problem.
Of the approximately 510,000 athletes who play at the NCAA level, 10 are transgender. Not 10,000, 10.
President Trump wants to prohibit money from going to states which allow those born as men from competing against women. Dana?
All right, Chad, thank you so much. I think 10 is 10 too many.
On this vote, the yeas are 51 and the nays are 45. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So disappointing news yesterday came in about the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act that failed to pass through the Senate. Both Democrats and Republicans voted on it in the Senate last night. It was an initial vote to see if it would pass through to actually be voted on, and it didn't get past the filibuster. So it was a cloture vote to decide whether it would actually go on to be voted on, and it was blocked. So remember, this bill passed through the House. We were all celebrating that, and now it's come to this point where it's basically been blocked from going any further. It needed 60 votes to advance, which would have required at least 7 Democrats to vote with all Republicans to move it. And every single Democrat, apart from 2 who were not there, voted against it. If this doesn't tell you what Democrats are all about, I don't know what will. One thing they're not about is women. It's the protection of women's sports and women's spaces, women's rights to fairness and safety when it comes to sports. They can't claim to be the party of women anymore, the party of women's rights. They can't claim that anymore. Nobody's buying it. And another thing it tells me is they're not about the will of the people. Because even their voters, even their constituents, overwhelmingly are for this bill. Common sense people don't think it's right that male athletes compete against women. Even male athletes who are on hormones and whatever. And all they've got to say is the justification for this is that there are few trans athletes. There's only 10. Obviously, that's only applying to the NCAA sports. Of course, there are a lot more than that. In private sporting bodies and local sporting events, women have to deal with this all the time. And they're failing to acknowledge that one trans athlete disenfranchises multiple women, not just one woman. That would be bad enough. But it affects multiple women. Riley Gaines pointed out that Leah Thomas disenfranchised 14,000 women, 14,000 female athletes. All they do is hide behind, oh, there's only 10. So Tommy Tuberville sought to amend Title IX, the federal civil rights law against sex discrimination, to prohibit schools from allowing transgender students to compete in athletic events designated for women or girls. It defines sex as based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth. And that's the direction that we want to go in, rather than gender identity. Yes, we have the executive order, which we all are very thankful for. But unfortunately, there are states that still insist on forcing girls to compete against boys, on forcing women to compete against men, destroying the women's category, destroying the integrity of categories in sports.
We are often told to stay quiet. We are told that speaking up makes us controversial. But if fighting for fairness makes us controversial, then so be it. The reality reality is that fighting for fairness in sports is not just a preference, it's a necessity. It's the reason we have age divisions, weight classes, and separate categories for male and female athletes. These distinctions exist to ensure safe, competitive, and meaningful opportunities for all. When fairness is compromised, the very essence of competition is destroyed. The problem extends beyond the field, the court, or the track. It's a reflection of a broader culture in the state of Maine that continues to dismiss and devalue female voices.
We've seen what's been going on in Maine. There are state governors who are determined to continue doing this. We've seen what's been going on in Washington state, Minnesota. These states are still insisting upon continuing this injustice against women. California, another one. So it was important that this bill was actually passed through so that protecting women's sports will be written into law. The states can do what they want, and I'm all for that. But they're not allowed to break the law. And this act would have been written into law, it would have been codified, and that's what we were going for. It would have effectively codified into law a February 5 executive order signed by President Trump to ban transgender student athletes from participating on girls' and women's sports teams. Senate Republicans had expected resistance from Democrats, who blocked the same bill from advancing in 2022. Ahead of the vote Monday, Senate Majority Leader John Thune said it will be a time of choosing for Democrats. And there was all this talk about Republicans daring Democrats to vote against it. Unfortunately, they called their bluff and they voted against it. But you know what? They can't hide behind their virtual signaling anymore. When it comes down to it, they are not for women. They've exposed who they really are. Thune said, if Democrats vote to oppose this legislation, they will have to answer to the women and girls they vote to disenfranchise. If you want to ensure that you never get re-elected ever again, carry on, Democrats, because that's what you're doing. And he said this doesn't have to be a Republican or Democrat issue. This is about standing up for girls and women, which I know my Democrat colleagues also care about. This is the approach we were taking. We were trying to be nice. We were trying to be nice and treat this as a non-partisan issue, treat this as a common sense issue. But the Democrats, they want to still push this radical leftist agenda, this radical extreme left agenda, even though many of their constituents are not for this. Many of their voters are not for this. But they don't care. They don't care about the will of the people. They're all about USAID and squandering taxpayers' money. They're all about that. They're not about what's in the best interest of the American people.
Today, I voted to protect women and girls from men participating in their sports. Men shouldn't be in their locker rooms. They shouldn't take their awards or scholarships. And we need to fight for them and protect sports and the integrity of women's sports in this country. That's what I voted for today in the U.S. Senate.
That was Senator John Husted. He said women and girls deserve legal protection from men competing in their sports, taking their scholarships and awards, and invading their locker rooms. I just voted to protect women and girls from unfair and dangerous policies that allow men to compete against them in women's sports.
This is happening. Mr. President, I could go down a list of examples here in the United States. The female runner who did not qualify for the women's 55-meter final at the state championship because a biological male identifying as a woman qualified in her place. Another female runner who resigned herself to second place at best because, as she said, she knew there would be no winning against the biological male who finished a full minute and 22 seconds ahead of the second place female finisher. The male pole vaulter who won the women's competition with a vault that exceeded that of the second place female finishers by 6 inches. The women's basketball team that saw nearly half of its season's points scored by a male. And that's just a sampling of the stories that are out there. And of course, Mr. President, the female athletes in question aren't just being robbed of their potential places on the winner's podium, they're also being robbed of the opportunities that might be associated with that place. Things like college scholarships. There's one female runner who was robbed of multiple wins by a biological male described the situation, and I quote, "It robs girls of the chance to race in front of college scouts who show up for elite meets and to compete for the scholarships and opportunities that come with college recruitment. I'll never know how my own college recruitment was impacted by losing those 4 state championship titles to a male. When colleges looked at my record, they didn't see the fastest girl in Connecticut. They saw a second or third place runner. Mr. President, this isn't fair. Girls should not be having to compete in races that are stacked against them. Women deserve their own athletic opportunities that are not taken away from them by biological males who have their own spaces in which to compete.
So Riley Gaines said, looking at this list, I see at least 8 to 10 Democrats who could easily be unseated with this vote alone. Bring on 2026 Republican campaign ads. Start early and run them 24/7. And we know how effective these Republican ads are, so she's right. Name and shame them all. Specifically, I want to highlight Georgia Democrat Senator Ossoff. You have a daughter. Have you no shame? Georgians are watching. I will make it my mission to do what I can to remove you from your Senate seat in 2026. It's not just federally elected Democrats who hate women. It's proven to be virtually all elected Democrats at all levels. Here's proof from tonight's vote in Minnesota, where all 66 House Democrats voted no on the Preserving Girls Sports Act. And one person I was surprised about was John Fetterman, because he did appear to be becoming more based in recent months.
Like, it's really common sense. And I'd like to remind everybody that we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of migrants here illegally that have convicted of crimes. And why, I don't know why, who wants to defend that, to allow them to remain in our nation after that? And now, if you're here illegally and you're committing crimes and those things, I don't know why anybody thinks that it's controversial that they all need to go.
Do you think that this was one of, if not the biggest issue for this election?
Well, I think if we can't, there's 47 of us in the Senate, and if we can't pull up with 7 votes, if we can't get at least 7 out of 47, if we can't, then that's the reason why we lost. That's one of them. That's one of why we lost.
I guess I was wrong. And let's remember, it was Pennsylvania who brought us Leah Thomas. This would have been a good opportunity for Fetterman to correct some of that injustice against women that was perpetuated from Pennsylvania. But no, instead he had this to say. The small handful of trans athletes in Pennsylvania in a political maelstrom deserve an ally, and I'm one of them. Depersonalized as they, them in a political ad, but are just school children. Empty show votes or cruelty on social media aren't part of a thoughtful, dignified solution. I guess the girls who have to be in locker rooms with boys, who have to compete against boys, I guess they aren't school children. Girls who signed up to play sports against other girls, I guess they're not school children either. The girls who we're fighting for to make sure that they have fairness and safety in sports, I guess they're not school children. I don't know where they came from. The girls who speak up and say, I don't want to compete against a boy, and then have to deal with a lot of harassment and even threats, I guess they're not school children. The girls who, in their final year of high school, are applying for colleges, who then end up losing out on scholarships and opportunities because a state championship was taken away from them by a male athlete, and they're just classed as a second place runner-up. I guess they're not school children. And let's remember, the trans athletes who are of school age, they're not required, for the most part, to take medications and be on hormones and, testosterone suppressants. They're not required to do any of that. All they need to do is just identify as a girl. And then they're allowed to compete against girls and go into their locker rooms.
This is wrong on every level. These are not girls. They're boys saying they're a girl. They're playing a false sport, come back and play a girl sport, and go back to playing a boy sport. All I have to do is change the paperwork at the district office. I'm not going to support it. I'm never going to lie to a kid. I'm going to support my wife, who was a pioneer in Title IX. And every other girl that's come along now expects every adult to do the right thing and protect them. We're not protecting girls now. K through 12 and women's sports. We're allowing men or boys to play in these sports. It's dangerous. It's wrong. We have boys in the locker rooms watching girls go through their get ready for practice or a match or a game. How wrong is that for a girl to have to endure something like that? What we would have called 5 or 6 years ago somebody going to jail is now acceptable in high schools and middle schools.
But of course, Fetterman decides to be an ally to the handful of transgender athletes who want to infringe upon women's sports and disenfranchise multiple female athletes in their own sports. That's who Fetterman decides to be an ally to, rather than encouraging them to compete in the correct category. And that's all this comes down to. Just compete in the correct category. That is not bigotry. That is not an attack. That is not harmful. But voting against this act takes away the protection of young girls that they have every right to expect when they go to school and when they go to compete in sports. And Paula Scallon, the young female athlete who found herself changing in a broom closet, all to avoid having to get undressed in front of a 6'4" man who was fully intact, exposing himself to the other female athletes. Fetterman is an ally to such people and not an ally to young girls like Paula. And she had something to say about his comments and his vote against protecting women and girls.
Is there something on this bill other than what I'm thinking it is that is keeping people from voting that they can point to and say, well, we want this out?
No, it's just that it's the stance of the Democrats to just not support this. I mean, even on the House side, we saw this in the House back in January now, and it got 2 Democrats to support it. And I remember celebrating this and being like, wow, oh my gosh, bipartisan support. This didn't happen the last time. And then I looked again and I realized there were 208 Democrats that voted no.
Right.
So it's like,
where's the 60% Democrats that are against this?
they can't. They're not in Congress, and that's what sucks. Because they're held hostage by this formal stance of their party, and the stance of the Democrat Party is to still say we support our whatever and mentally ill men in competing in women's sports, and they're dying on that hill, and they've doubled down on it. And we watch the left-wing media continue to talk about this issue. They're doubling down on this.
And this is why you lost, and this is why you'll probably never win again, Democrats.
And they aren't going to stop being transgender just because you strip them from sports or from housing or from their health care or any other public place that you don't want us to be. And so, members, make no mistake that this is just another version of state-sanctioned bullying and genocide. And I don't say that lightly.
That was over in Minnesota. These are the sort of people who vote on these issues that have real-life consequences. Minnesota Democrat State Rep Alicia Kozlowski says keeping men out of women's sports is a state-sanctioned bullying and genocide. If you're waiting for Democrats to moderate and return to sanity, don't hold your breath. I think we have to come to that understanding. I was being nice. I was saying, bipartisan and common sense. I don't think we can give them the benefit of the doubt anymore. We really can't. These are radical leftists who are willing to die on such a bizarre hill to die on. I mean, it makes no sense. Get these people out of office. Midterms, get these people out of office. This is serious. What we can do now is hope that maybe the threat of losing their federal funding would encourage these states to do the right thing. I mean, this article says, despite the setback in the Senate, there is hope that the spirit of the bill and the declarations made in legislation would still be implemented nationwide. In February, Trump issued the Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports executive order, which made the official policy of the US to oppose male competitive participation in women's sports more broadly, as a matter of safety, fairness, dignity, and truth. So unfortunately, it's not going to be codified into law right now, but let's hope that states make the right decision based on pressure from people like us. We have made it clear that we are not for men competing against women. We're not for boys competing against girls, our daughters, our nieces, our granddaughters. We're not for that. Regular people, even those who vote Democrat, many are not for it, the majority. So let's hope at a state level that enough pressure can be put on school districts, sporting bodies to do the right thing. Let's hold them accountable. And let's get these senators, these crazy, far radical leftist senators who are not for the interests of women, out of office come 2026. Remember, when Democrats talk about women's rights, they are exclusively referring to killing babies in the womb. They don't care at all about actually protecting women and girls.
I have 3 boys right now that are collegiate athletes, 2 wrestling at Oklahoma State, 1 wrestling at University of Oklahoma. House divided, different issue. I also got 3 girls that are wrestling too. And the idea that Democrats are okay to allow a male to participate in a female sport, especially something like wrestling, is mind-blowing. One side, I'm very upset as a father. On the other side, I'm like, hey, good, keep voting this way. We're going to keep winning elections on the Republican side because you guys are absolutely crazy. You have lost your ever-loving mind to think it's okay for men to participate in women's sports, for men to go into a women's locker room and change, for men to go into a women's bathroom and use the bathroom in front of our daughters. And you think that's okay? Try to defend that, please.
Let me know what you think. Are you still hopeful that perhaps the threat of losing federal funding, the pressure that the public put on these school districts, put on these state governors, do you think that will still have impact and we can be hopeful that we will still see change? Or are you quite devastated by this setback and shocked that not one single Democrat voted to protect women and girls? Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.